So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for being here. And thanks to the Global Entrepreneurs Network and Global Entrepreneur Week here in the UK for having us. This ought to be a really exciting one. We're going to be talking about the power of voice. Hold on a second. Hey, Google, stop. Pretty powerful, huh? It just went away. Joining me is James Poulter. So James is a very interesting guy. He is, I would say, one of the leading aficionados in the voice AI space in the world. His company, Vixen Labs, is located in London, and they do work around the world. And we'll talk a little bit about the power of voice. But the first thing I want to bring up is a quote from your site, James, and ask you a little bit about it before we get to talk to you about who you are. Voice isn't just about smart speakers and AIs. This is the next interface for accessing the internet, which means it's the next interface for everything we do. That's a pretty bold statement.
I only trade in bold statements, as you know, Frank. So thank you for that. But, yeah, and I mean, I truly believe that. I think that, you know, as for those of you listening and watching this perhaps live or on the repeats afterwards, you know, think of what your daily lifestyle looks like today and the types of things that you're trying to get done with technology around the house or in the car or on you know, out in the street, or maybe you're in a restaurant or a store at some point in the future. When you're watching this, maybe you've been allowed to go back into a restaurant or a store in person. And we're all trying to get things done as quickly as we can and in the most human, natural way as possible. And the thing that we all know how to do before we learn to text or type or swipe on a screen is we learn how to speak, and we learn how to speak to one another, and we use sound and words to get things done. And you know, then fast forward to 2020, we've got now a whole ecosystem of devices with microphones, with Wi-Fi, with speakers that can listen to us and understand us and respond to us in real time. And it makes the friction of those annoying tasks, those things we need to get done every day, begin to disintegrate. That as that friction goes away, it becomes the thing that we will default over to, because it's the most natural thing for us to do. If we can just ask for it and get our answer, why would we pull out an app, you know, dial into a phone, go 3 menus deep to find the piece of information that we need when we can just ask it? And we're already beginning to see globally and even here in the UK that is becoming the preference for many people in terms of how they get things done with their use of technology, that voice is becoming the most natural thing that they can do. And because we all use the internet now for basically everything, I think it will become the next interface for doing most things on the internet in some way. Screens aren't going anywhere. We're not going to get rid of touch screens tomorrow. But what we will find is that we begin to interact with those screens using our voices more frequently than ever before.
So, I mean, clearly the idea of using voice as a UX to help you navigate is something that, think about right now, given the pandemic, is probably a pretty positive thing, something that people want to know more and more about.
That's right. Yeah, I think the pandemic has shown us, in particular, you know, that this has accelerated trend that we were already seeing before COVID. You know, if you scroll back 12 months, we already saw an increase in people listening to podcasts and using audiobooks as forms of entertainment. That's nearly doubled since the time that the lockdown has come in. We've been seeing for a long time people switching over to discovering music by, you know, asking Siri on their phone or on a HomePod or on their, you know, Alexa device. And that's also doubled under the lockdown. And we've seen increasingly people using voice devices to find local information, things like opening hours for restaurants, and you know, as that's been in a site of chaos over the past few months, turning to their voice devices to get that done as well. Because we're at home, we've got these devices around our homes. We don't necessarily have our phones in our hands or our iPads in our hands as frequently when we're indoors. And we'll use that technology that's bedded into our home life to get things done. And so COVID has accelerated the use of voice inside the home, but it's also created a really interesting problem for people who run places out in the world that we all interact with, things like shops and restaurants, you know, where previously we relied upon things like touch screens and keypads and, you know, number pads to kind of input information. And those are all places where germs and dirt, kind of hide. And we're increasingly seeing brands and businesses looking at solutions like voice technology in places like drive-throughs, in ACMs, in in-store kiosks as a way of transitioning away from using just touchscreens to get things done, moving towards voice as an interface to deliver customer service as well. And I think that's a big opportunity for lots of brands and businesses over the next 12 months.
So you've already sort of transitioned us into the chat I want to have about where this may fit into the entrepreneur's space. But before we talk about that, let's go back a bit and talk about how you became an entrepreneur. Because when we first met, you were working for arguably one of the biggest and best known companies in the world, doing some really cool stuff. Because when we first met, what you were doing with voice was pretty nascent. You were just getting things started. And so tell me a little bit about you, James Poulter, your background and how you became an entrepreneur.
Yeah, sure. So prior to running Vixen Labs, which is our voice consultancy and design studio that we run today, I previously worked as the head of emerging platforms and partnerships at the Lego Group, the toy manufacturer and digital games manufacturer now. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Lego in some way, either from your childhood or from your children's childhoods, or standing on it in the middle of the night. And I spent a number of years working there, heading up a team of people looking at emerging technologies, different, kind of emerging things that we were seeing in the landscape, and how those might change the way in which we built products, the way in which we did marketing, and the way in which we had developed consumer experiences. And so I spent a number of years there working on things like chatbots and AI, things like partnerships and collaborations with some of the world's largest kind of technology vendors, and building voice applications for platforms like Alexa and Google Assistant. And as a result of that, then I found myself after 2 years of doing that work, starting to look around for what I might do next, having been at Lego for a number of years in a previous role as well. And was looking at, okay, well, where am I going to go and make my career move, and where can I step into my own projects? And I had the opportunity to move into doing what I do now through partnership. My colleague Jen Heap and I, who Frank well, met through happenstance, actually at the same event that I think Frank, you and I first met at properly. And we both realized that this opportunity around voice technology was something that we could see coming down the pipe, that we could see that large global institutions and brands were going to have to wrestle with as consumers began to bring it into their lives. And it reminded me very much of previous technology revolutions that I'd seen happen over the past couple of decades. My first career started out in the world of social media. I started my first job back in the kind of 2008, 2009, working in one of the global ad firms, Ogilvy, which is part of the WPP network. And we were starting to build a social media practice. It wasn't even really called that back then. It was called 360i. It was like digital interactive things. It was born out of the PR department of that agency. And it was all based around communication and a new form of way of getting information and communication done, and through social media. To paint the picture, 2008 was kind of the dawn of Facebook pages, brands coming onto Twitter for the first time, blogger relations, lots of people dealing with bloggers, long before kind of TikTok influencers or anything like that. And at that time, I saw a number of agencies, the big groups that I was part of, actually have their lunch eaten by smaller firms that were able to move much faster, that were hiring specialist people and going after big brands that we would have otherwise worked with. And I think the same has been really true for us as I went out on this journey of launching Vixen, is that we saw that actually the big companies, they aren't able to move fast enough. They don't have specialist expertise. They can't dedicate additional resources just because they want to investigate a new platform, and they can't pivot fast enough. And we as small companies, as startups and entrepreneurs, are able to do that. I think that's one of the most exciting things about entrepreneurship, is the ability to jump on something and kind of make it happen for yourself. And so when I saw the same thing happening with voice, I thought that would be our moment to leverage the contacts and the relationships that we had and the partners that we knew, and be able to go after it and make it something for ourselves. And that's exactly what we've been doing for the past couple of years.
So tell me a little bit about the delta of voice. So I read today that there are 1 billion Amazon Echo devices out there now. I mean, the numbers are astounding. And when we first met, I remember, and this was, I guess, 3-4 years ago, the numbers were starting to build. They were still pretty big, but I mean, people tend not to even think about, when you say voice AI, what I do, and I talk to people about it, they think Amazon, they think Google, but not necessarily that, hey, every single smartphone in the world has a voice AI device built into it. So whether it's Siri or whether it's the Samsung, the Bixby, whatever it is, the numbers are astounding. Tell me a little bit about that and the growth of that.
Well, you're absolutely right. So if you look at the world today, we have 1 billion Google Assistant enabled devices in the world in the form of, hundreds of millions of Android phones and cars and televisions and headphones, and also hundreds of thousands and many millions of smart speakers. These smart devices, some of them with screens, some of them just with speakers, that we've put in our homes around the world. We're at a point now where in the US, it's nearly a third. In the UK, here it's about a quarter of homes have a smart speaker in them, across a range of price points from a range of different manufacturers. I have like 3 or 4 of them in this room as we speak. But from all of the major partners that you would expect, everyone is launching smart speakers and have been over the past couple of years. Some of them with screens, like this Google Nest Hub I have here has a screen on it. Then we've got, from Apple, the likes of their new devices like the HomePod Mini, which just launched this week. These devices are coming into our homes at an amazing rate for a few different reasons. One, that they are cheaper than many other consumer electronics that we've had to bring into the home before. You're not talking about laying down hundreds of dollars or hundreds of pounds on a smartphone or a laptop. This is something that today on Amazon, as we enter into Black Friday sales, you're going to be able to buy an Echo for £30 or something of that nature. So cheap, easy to use. They just require your voice to talk to them, and we see across all age ranges and demographics people adopting these speakers at similar rates. My 92-year-old grandmother has got an Echo Show in her living room. I can video call her on it and she doesn't have to do anything. It just comes up on the screen and we can talk. That was never possible before with other types of technology for her to kind of adopt that at her age. So ease of use, speed of adoption, and cheap. But also the most thing is that we are all trying to just get things done around our house and around our lives as quickly and as easily as possible. And voice commands, being able to just ask something to turn the lights on or play some music or add something to a shopping list or buy something from Amazon. That's what we're all doing in our homes every day anyway, and it's much simpler in many cases to do that with one of these devices. So that's what's catapulted the use in our homes in particular. But over time, I think what we're going to see is that move from inside our homes to outside of our homes much more as we carry them around with us.
So I think that brings me to, or us to, a discussion of a recent study that Vixen has released around the consumer usage of these devices. I immediately I gravitated towards it, not just because we had met and you made it exciting, but because it was a great way for me to access music without having to get up and I guess nobody puts a cassette into a deck anymore anyway, or even touches a DVD, but even calling up a CD, but calling up a playlist, which I've created and can access on my a Google device or on my Alexa device. I also use it as a way, for me, an entry into the Internet of Things, which is these are consumer things. You've done a study. Tell us a little bit about it, what it's called, and what you've learned from it, and what we entrepreneurs can learn from it as well.
Absolutely. Well, I'll go ahead and share a couple of slides from this study that we've just conducted, because I hope that will add some value to those watching. So the research that we've just finished completing is something called the Vixen Labs Voice Commerce Report. And this was conducted at the end of September and released at the start of October. So just a couple of weeks ago from us now as we speak. And worth stating for posterity's sake, if you're watching this online in a number of weeks' time, that bear in mind the UK situation at that time, COVID, we're living with it, but we had unlocked. We weren't in a second lockdown at that time. But obviously that's had an impact on the results that we're seeing. We studied 1,000 users and non-users of voice technology in the UK during that month, and asked them a number of different attitudinal questions about the use of voice technology. And we just took I'll share with you a couple of the key learnings from the study that we can kind of maybe apply to our lives. I mentioned this is something that we conducted at Vixen Labs. There's me and my colleague Jen, I mentioned before. And the reason we did this is because we work with brands from lots of different backgrounds, from finance to food, to consumer goods, to retailers, on a global basis. And all of them are looking at how people are using these devices, not just how many of them are using them. And that's what we tried to endeavor to look into in this study. So within the world of voice, one of the big things we were looking at is what is the role that voice plays in commerce, and how can we drive commercial value from it? So it's not just purchasing. I mean, that's a part of it, people buying things with these devices, but a large part of it is the role that voice plays in the commercial journey, from discovery to decision-making to actually purchasing, and then through to loyalty and customer service and aftercare. All of those are parts of the customer journey that are impacted by voice technology. And one of the big headline takeaways that we took from this study is that in the UK, 40% of users are already using their devices to actually make a purchase. That central part of the journey. They're actually buying things. Now, this could be digital goods, subscriptions, things from service providers, things like food delivery, and also buying individual products from retailers. But across the board, if you look broadly across all demographics, this number is, I think, quite surprising for many of us, and I think has been accelerated quite particularly by the lockdown and by COVID, as many of us have been looking at other ways of getting things done in the home, not necessarily going to retail locations, and obviously ordering more food delivered to our homes than ever before. When you look into who's doing it, we see quite a broad spectrum, but the big leading category is parents and families. Around 40% of those are willing to book things like events or destinations, but 50% of them are buying food delivered to their home. And I think that's a big telling point about the way in which our lives have transformed during lockdown and since COVID. More and more families turning to takeaway and food delivery services for both groceries and also quick service restaurants to get things done at home. But that's not just exclusively parents. We see that across all ages and demographics. And when it comes to actual purchases of other devices and other things, that's broadly seen as well. So parents lead the way, and those in the 25 to 44-year-old age group are definitely the leaders of all of these purchases. But we see that voice-activated tech is definitely pushing forward, and I think that's an exciting thing that we should all be considering. Is if you're selling something as an entrepreneur today and voice isn't part of your strategy, it probably needs to be. There's a bit of variation across different sectors. Food leads the way, retail very quick follow behind it, finance slightly behind that, and not surprisingly, because one, there's not a lot of use cases for finance that have been developed out yet, but also privacy becomes a concern. And entertainment is lower than you might expect, but to Frank's point, we're not as many of us buying CDs and DVDs anymore. A few of us are buying LPs again, but the majority of us subscribe to our media. We're not, buying individual tracks and albums as much, and so purchases in the entertainment sector tend to pivot more towards things like purchases of TV shows, films for video on demand services, and then entertainment like events and ticket purchases. But what's more important,
I was going to say, I actually use my devices to operate my TV through the Amazon Fire Stick, and so it's a great way to discover something without having to actually try hard to find something. It's very difficult occasionally to go in and look for something that when you can actually ask for something, that it will then find something for you, which Absolutely. I think is one of the great things about this technology.
Absolutely. And we actually saw that 4 in 10 people are already controlling their TVs at home with voice. So that is already beginning to hit, which is quite surprising, because voice control has only really been available in the past couple of generations of televisions with any kind of level of quality. And most people don't upgrade those TVs more than every usually 5 years as an average life cycle for a television purchase. So actually we're seeing a lot of people making that choice to upgrade their TVs, and voice is becoming a part of it, either through set-top boxes or the TVs themselves. What I think was interesting, and this is probably the one that's most broadly applicable to anyone that's watching this today or on repeat, is this stat around users searching for information about specific brands with their voice. So purchasing is like one part of the puzzle, but the much bigger part of this, and the bigger opportunity, I think, for anyone that is starting a business today, is that people are using voice technology to search for information about brands and businesses, your brands and businesses, and quite crucial information that they're looking for. When we dig into this, again, parents lead the way, but this is actually broadly done across all age gaps and spectrum, that people are looking for information that's quite specific in many cases. Things like opening times, restaurant availability, pricing and stock information, functionality, FAQs about your brand and business. And they're using their voice to do this on all manner of devices, from smart speakers to Siri and Google Assistant on the phone to in the car and on headphones. And it crosses quite a wide variety. We just have this fictitious JP Sports brand here. And you can see, the types of queries that people are asking, buying a jacket from brand, or upgrade my membership. So purchase-based queries, task-based queries like being add calories to a fitness app, or to start a meditation, or information queries like how many steps should I take in a day, or like what's the best way to keep fit. And these are just examples that just pertain to this one type of brand, right? If you're running a fitness store, these are the types of queries that might be relevant to you. But any brand and any business that sits within this ecosystem would have similar types of queries across these different conversational domains. And that's what we think is a big opportunity that lies ahead for the next couple of years, is that if you've got a brand or a business that's trying to engage with consumers, whether that or other businesses, B2B customers that are not excluded here, you are looking for opportunities to kind of rank for these questions when a smart speaker is trying to answer them. And for many people, they've not even started on that journey yet. So we see people looking for...
I'm going to ask you a quick question,
sure.
because all of this is great. I don't want you to stop telling me about it, but a couple of things come to mind. One is, so I'm an entrepreneur. I'm fascinated by this study. How do I get it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you want to get a copy of it, you have to just go to vixenlabs.co. That I'll throw that up on the screen in a second so you can find it. And you can just go to /VCR, the voice commerce report. So it's vixenlabs.co/VCR. And you can go grab a copy of this for yourself. And when you do, you can just jump into our website and download a copy of the executive summary yourself.
Okay, so let me ask another question before you go back into it and tell us some more about it. So in terms of actually creating a purchase using voice, let me posit a couple of things. You tell me if I'm right about this, because I actually haven't used it as a way to purchase something, but I have issues, and I want to ask you about those issues. One is security. Right. So if I want to purchase something using my Alexa, my Echo device, I have an account with Amazon. It already exists. My credit cards are attached to it. So if I want to go in and buy something, say on Amazon or anywhere else, I can link it to the credit card that's already existing in my Amazon account. So an easy way to do it without having to start from scratch and put in another long number and expiration date and so on. How safe is that? And is that something that an entrepreneur who's trying to get into the commerce side of voice has to worry about?
Yeah, so in terms of how safe it is, it's pretty much as safe as using your credit card attached to the Amazon app on your phone. or on the web. The actual safety of it and that information is contained within your Amazon account or your Google account, and so the same level of security is applied there. If you live in a house with maybe young kids running around or other people that might know that you can buy things from these devices, then there's a slight risk there that if you haven't set up something like a voice PIN, which is like a short code that you have to say to confirm a purchase, that maybe you're exposing a bit of abuse there. But people would have to be inside your house to make that happen in the first place. So it's pretty secure. In terms of for businesses and entrepreneurs that are thinking about how do I add voice to my business, the process is obviously different depending on what you're selling and what the platform is. But if you're not selling a regulated product or something that's age restricted, most brands are able to add voice purchasing to their journey in some way. And you might take that in different methods. One is obviously, as you mentioned, doing something with one of the platform partners like Alexa or Google and adding it to a smart speaker app, which is a larger investment, a larger amount of time. If you've got a mobile app already, then thinking about doing simpler things like being able to jump deep into a transaction in your mobile app is something you could also consider doing, and that's a lot less work. So Google has something called App Actions, which if you've got an Android app that already say you're a bank and you can send money. I want to send $10 to Frank in my mobile app. I could ask my Google,
which is fine with me, by the way. You can do that if you want.
Out, yeah. My Google Assistant would allow me to have an app shortcut essentially into that app, and I could just jump straight into sending Frank $10. I don't have to open the app, find the send money, go to Frank as a destination, and then enter the amount. I could pre-populate all of that stuff just with a voice query. And this is what I see a lot as examples of people using voice to shorten existing user journeys, particularly for repeat tasks. One of the things that I think many brands get wrong is that they try and replicate everything their mobile app or their website does and try and find a way of voice doing it. And you're never going to do that because some of these journeys are super long and complicated on a mobile as it is. They have lots of options, and a voice experience just isn't great for hearing all that stuff read out and trying to retain it all. It's just too complicated. But the thing that is really easy for voice to do is to take those little tasks, the ones we do every day, all the time, the routine moments, the things that are habitual, and make those really quick and easy for us to do. And we can do that through linking an account that you might already have on your existing app to your voice assistant, might be doing a shortcut on your mobile app. Or it might just be providing that information on a web page that's been optimized to be the answer to the question that someone might be asking. If I want to know how to get a stain out of my carpet, all I have to do is ask Alexa, and an answer from WikiHow is going to come up and answer that question, right? So if you have a better answer than the WikiHow answer and you're a brand, you could go to the work of optimizing that page to rank higher than the WikiHow answer. So there are lots of different ways into this, and it's not always just building an app that tries to replicate what your mobile app already does.
So this is clearly a reason why I would want to hire Vixen Labs and James and Jen to consult with me, because all of this is not something that is common knowledge or easily understood going into it. Even smart people are going to find that it's not quite the same. Some of these tasks that you talk about are known as skills, and they're different. There's a different name for it for Google. There's a different name for it for Samsung. They're essentially, they're kind of like apps. Tell me a little bit.
Yeah.
But they're apps in the voice domain as opposed to an app that exists on your phone. It is a specialized app for voice. Tell me a little bit about if I'm an entrepreneur and I want to get into this space. What do I need to know about the way those skills and apps work? How can I make them work for me? And how do I create them?
Yeah, sure. Well, so there's a number of different ways in. Voice apps, they are essentially like your mobile apps. So in the same way that we can build apps for iOS or apps for Android and put them in the app stores, we can do the same thing for Alexa. They call them skills. We can do the same thing for Google Assistant. They're called actions. We can do the same thing for Samsung devices. They're called capsules for Bixby, which is Samsung's assistant. And those applications, they basically are microservices. They're small little bundles of productivity, of activities, of entertainment packaged up and deployed to the app stores in the same way that your apps on your phone are today. Now, there are different ways of building those, from the very simple to the very complicated. We at Vixen tend to deal with the very complicated because we deal with big, Fortune 500, FTSE 500 type companies. And that is very similar to the same type of thing you would experience if you were building a mobile app with a web development agency or something like that. It involves user experience design, a conversational design, scripting, and development technology to get that type of thing done. At the more entry level end, you can use things like blueprints from Alexa, which are provided free of charge for people to experiment with. They're kind of like cheat sheets for getting an app built. Or you can use an intermediary tool, something like VoiceFlow, one of our partners, that allow you to build these slightly more complicated apps yourselves. But it's kind of like using Squarespace for building a website, which, if you've listened to a podcast in the past 5 years, you know what Squarespace is. But like that Squarespace is that kind of templatized, more toolkit kind of method of doing it. So there's lots of different ways in, but the big thing is trying to find the use case that people need your app for. That's the most important point.
So I'm an entrepreneur, and I come to you and I say, I've got this product or service that I believe there's a dovetail into the voice space. What is the process that I would go through with you to create for me something that I might be able to monetize down the road?
Yeah, so the first thing that we try and look at is who are the users that you're going after? Who is it that you're trying to target? Not everyone uses these devices in the same way. And as you've just seen from some of that data we shared from the commerce report, for example, parents use these devices much more frequently and much more actively, and for slightly different things than other.
And feel free to dip back into that as you need to illustrate your conversation.
Yeah, I will do. So, one of the things that we see is, for example, if you're talking about, say, a shopping app, say that you're a retailer, you have a product, not everyone is going to use these apps to do the purchasing bit, as I mentioned. I'll just share this example from some of the data that we have here. So when we look at people shopping in one of these destinations, they're doing different types of things. What they're majoritively doing is doing information gathering type tasks. So, if you're looking on the screen right now, let me just grab my little draw tool here. You're looking at pricing and product availability, and you're looking at location and opening times. These are information gathering tasks, right? Whereas the activity tasks, the ones that are more action based, like purchasing, adding a product to basket, or sending a recommendation, these are actions that people will do, and there's less people looking to do those things right now. We estimate that will change over time. And so what we would be looking at with say Frank's Frank's liquor store comes to me. You want to sell your nice bottles of whiskey and you want to kind of make some money doing that. Well, okay, who's buying whiskey today? Is that family members? Are they doing it for gifting, for occasions? There's a lot of choice in the world of whiskey. How do I make a decision? Those are the types of queries that people are going to be asking around things like product, price, and availability, right? People buying gifts around those things. So we might want to try and find out the different types of things that people want to ask. And so we can do that in a number of ways. We can look at things like the Google keyword planner to understand the types of queries that people are asking Google. We can look at the existing apps that are out there in the app stores to make an assessment of what ones are working well and what ones aren't. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is get to the bottom of what questions might a consumer be asking about your brand or business, and find ways of us answering those questions. And usually there's about 4 different ways of answering that question on a smart speaker. It might be a web result. So it might be optimizing what's already on the web to be the thing that Google or Alexa reads out. It might be to optimize a piece of content, like a YouTube video or a recipe, for example. Say your whiskey brand has cocktails. We might want to optimize the existing cocktail recipes you already have to play back when someone asks, how do I make an old fashioned or a mojito? And then the third would be to actually make your app be the thing that answers it, your mobile app. So, okay, I can browse for the different whiskeys in the mobile app that I already have installed on my phone that Frank's already provided to me. So I might optimize it to direct me there. And the fourth would be a voice app. a custom piece of application that we build for voice, which maybe is a whiskey selection tool that walks you through the types of whiskeys that you might like and ultimately helps you make the decision in buying one. But whichever route that is, it needs to be the most helpful thing that a consumer is looking for in that moment to get things done. And that's usually where we start, understanding what people want, looking at the questions they ask, and working out which of those four main things, whether that's a web result, piece of content, a mobile app, or a voice app, is the best thing to serve that question or query.
When we first met, the discussion about voice was early. It was a really cool thing, and geez, I need to have one of these. I'm a company. I don't know anything about voice, but I need to get into this space. To where are we now? Where are we now? It's gone beyond I'm a company and I need to get into this space. It's got to be way beyond that now.
Yeah, I think we're coming out of that kind of trough of disillusionment that Gartner's hype cycle often talks about, that people have tried a lot of innovation in the early days and middling kind of results from those innovations. And most of the time, and this is a problem with innovation programs overall in all large businesses and ones I've worked in myself, is that typically people don't invest in marketing their innovations in the same way that they do investing in marketing in their kind of stable business as usual products, right? You don't take a punt on the thing that you're not quite sure about and throw loads of money behind it and expect loads of people to show up. And as a result, that can cause a problem of people then not investing because they didn't get the results that they expected. And they didn't get the results because they didn't invest in telling people about it. We're coming out of that phase now where we're beginning to show, particularly because of the role that search plays in this, the role that people are using these devices at scale to search for queries about brands that we all know and behave and kind of deal with every day. Because of that scale, voice and search in particular is becoming a major thing. And so I think you're going to see in 2021 more and more brands investing in the optimization of their content, the optimization of their web pages and mobile apps to make sure that those can be discovered through conversational interfaces, whether that's voice, chatbots, or anything in between. And that voice apps, those will become the things that we use to get routine tasks done for when we interact with those brands or businesses, or just with our own use of technology. So I think that's where we're heading. We're probably about where social was at the early days of Facebook pages. We're still in that kind of phase right now.
So the AI part of voice is the thing that keeps me from having to touch a specific app in order to then access it. I say something, it goes and searches out that skill without having to have me specifically say, go to that skill.
Yeah.
Is there an inherent issue with technophobes looking at this technology and just simply not being able to get their head around it? Is that a barrier to entry? And what are the barriers to entry that a person that would come to you needs to surmount?
Well, you're absolutely right. So privacy is one of the things that lots of people suggest is an issue in this space, and kind of the giving away of data, the worrying about it being somehow that these devices are always listening to us, or that the microphones are always on. I mean, the microphones aren't always on and they're not always listening to us. They have the ability to hear us at any point if triggered with the right word, but they're not always listening to us. And that's just one of those things that most people, I think, it's just a common misconception, and the media hasn't done a great job in purveying those things correctly. But what I think the bigger barrier is people's distrust in some of the big platforms like Google and Amazon. We see that in our own study, in our own data. It shows that people have some barriers to entry, but it's not just about privacy. It's about accuracy. So when we talk about large amounts of people asking questions to these devices as a way of kind of finding information about a product or a brand or a service, or finding some media content, the problem that comes up time and time again is that it's not accurate enough. And that's where the work of those that provide the data to these platforms really need to do the work, right? Is that, you know, the brands and businesses that are the ones that know their opening hours, that know their media catalogs, that know their product information, they need to start doing the work of optimizing that content to be found and make the AI much more accurate at discovering that information. And we're beginning to see the wheels of business move in that direction. I think we will see over the next couple of years many more people get on board with doing that. And ultimately that makes these things more usable. But there's a really interesting thing here with kind of cognitive dissonance that happens in all technologies, which is people say that they're afraid of them and that they're worried about privacy, and yet they use them anyway. Because if they have enough utility, you'll give up the privacy every day of the week. The amount of people that say that they hate Facebook and that they're afraid of Mark Zuckerberg and what he wants, but yet still use WhatsApp to send, you know, pictures of their kids to their friends and, you know, kind of go on Instagram Reels for half an hour every evening, it just doesn't match up. There are just way more people that are willing to forego that privacy for the entertainment.
Given though the fact that people may not actually know who own those other apps because they're not called Facebook. But that's another conversation to have. One of the things that fascinates me about voice is that it's one of these tools that not only serves a purpose, can be part of your strategic planning, whether it's consumer or marketing, whatever, sales. But it does all of that, and it is a multifunctional tool that you can use to market something that you're selling at the same time. Absolutely. Do you find people come into that, or do you as a consultant tell people how to make that work for them?
Yeah, I think that is the point about it being multifaceted, right? Is that it's not just an app, it's not just content, it's not just the web, it's all of those things, and that's why, you know, the difference again between, you know, social media or mobile apps in the past, like these are it's an interface. It's the next interface for getting things done. So it's not just one technology or one assistant that we're talking about here. It's about the general movement of consumers and human beings in general to find the path of least resistance. That's what we're talking about. And given that voice technology is a way of doing that, they'll head in that direction.
You know, that sort of begs the question that always happens when you start talking about technologies that are similar. And that is, when will they be able to speak to each other?
Right. Well, the interoperability initiative that Amazon and Google are parts of is going somewhat that direction. So we're increasingly going to see more and more devices that have multiple assistants already on them. So you know, we're seeing this a lot in the automotive sector already. You've got devices that have, like the BMW, where you can have the BMW assistant, but also Alexa in the car at the same time. Most head units support the Google Assistant or CarPlay at the same time. And most of the headphone manufacturers do this as well, right? If I fire up my Bose headphones, I can choose between it using Siri on my iPhone, or I can have it automatically use Alexa or Google Assistant. So we're beginning to see that happen. But what isn't happening yet is those assistants actually talking to one another, or allowing data to flow freely between those different places. And that is an element of privacy. It's a matter of company policy, and it's also a matter of consumer pressure. People need to start asking these device manufacturers to make their data more open and more secure at the same time. So I think we're heading in that direction because people will ask for it over time. I think that as consumer literacy around their own data and what people are doing with their own data grows, you'll see more and more people ask for these device manufacturers and these, you know, kind of technology superpowers, quite frankly, to open up their doors to make them more interoperable. We've seen this a little bit in recent years with Cortana and Alexa integrations, with Facebook using Alexa on their Poulter devices, for example. And it's the constant battle between, you know, kind of amalgamation and you know, monopolization. Is, you know, if you want true utility and everything to work perfectly, you know, one global technology superpower that knows everything about everything is actually the most useful, but it's also the most dangerous from a competition perspective. And so that's a tension that I think we're going to have to deal with from a policy perspective for many years to come.
Quick question, because I've got so much more to ask you and so little time to ask it. And by the way, if anybody has a question, you want to drop it into the chat, I'll try and get to it. And that is there a reason why maybe one app, one voice system, maybe better than another, or it's bigger than, I mean, I'm thinking, how many Samsung phones are out there? Does that make that app or that system, or how many Apple phones are out there? Why would I choose one over another? Or would I?
Well, I think what we're really seeing is that people are beginning to use multiple assistants in their homes at the same time. For many people, for most iPhone users, they don't own a HomePod, but they probably own an Alexa or a Google Assistant device. So there you've got two assistants already competing in one household. You mentioned Samsung. That Bixby has had a bit of a rocky ride, and Samsung have somewhat stepped away from making Bixby such a prominent feature and continue to emphasize the use of Google Assistant via Android on their devices. So I think, it's realistic that we would all live with multiple of these assistants doing slightly different jobs for us. And all of them have a slightly different, that the assistants themselves provide slightly different utility. Google comes from a world of search. Therefore, they're great at surfacing answers to questions, right? That's what Google Assistant is great at doing. Alexa is great at finding products because it's built by the world's largest e-commerce retailer. There's no surprise. So, they all have slightly different attitudes to what they do. Siri and Apple have taken a much more privacy-based stance of saying, actually, no, we're going to make, a lot of what we do is all about controlling your devices, but we're not going to give your data to anyone else. And so it's more private and therefore maybe slightly less helpful, but is great at controlling its own ecosystem. The Siri integration across its own devices is one of the best out there, but it just isn't very good at talking to anything else. So I think realistically, unless there's a major move by Apple to open up to developers and third parties, which we're seeing early edges of, but nothing too extravagant, I think we're going to be living with multiple assistants in our homes and cars and headphones for a long time to come.
So it's funny, I was thinking about how I use those devices. I have a number of them myself, and find myself using Siri to do voice to text or to do translation. But
right.
I'm not thinking about the fact that I'm actually using a voice device to do these things, although I am. And the couple of the other things that you discussed that sort of bubbled up in my mind was how it interfaces with automotive, how it interfaces in the home. It's not just turn the lights on, turn the lights off. There's also, ways to have it operate your other devices in the house, help you buy things that you're low on in your refrigerator, all of those things. Then, of course, the issues that you had and brought up from the study about how parents are interfacing with it and its usage. It makes me wonder, especially given COVID, are there educational uses for voice that have yet to be tried or are being tried?
Well, I mean, particularly, literacy in that area of education is a big opportunity with voice. Many parents are turning to using voice devices, during the lockdown to help with things like scheduling. Kids being able to launch Zoom calls on their, for their home learning, for example. But on the actual act of education, we are beginning to see voice become a part of that process. Language learning through voice interactions is becoming an increasing trend. We're also seeing more and more people using voice devices to help with things like literacy around English learning and things like that. Listening to audio content like podcasts and audiobooks as well, making those things much more available. And also not just learning, but development. The opportunity of answering some of the kind of the loneliness epidemic, particularly with older adults as well, and in that space, I think is an opportunity that we'll see many more people dive into. And as the assistant and as Alexa become more personalized, that's where the opportunity really lies. The more that these devices know about you as an individual and your likes, your dislikes, your tastes, your age and stage in life, the more they can be helpful. And that's where you'll probably see more things like education, kind of opportunities open up as well.
So I've posited a couple of things that we've had discussions about in the past. For example, as these video voice devices become more and more prevalent, and as the usage numbers increase, I would imagine that this entire ecosystem could become a new entertainment content distribution platform. Are there ideas and thoughts about creation of new and different types of platforms using these devices?
But by that, do you mean new types of platforms for different use cases?
Yeah, content distribution, for example, video distribution, for example, that sort of thing. I mean, you mentioned that you're already doing two-way video conversations with your grandmother, but I'm talking about, hey, up comes a movie that I now throw to my TV using, if it's a Google device, using a Chromecast to put a movie that has come to me on my small device because of the gigantic size of that distribution platform.
Well,
And now I
absolutely.
can watch it on the big screen.
Well, we're seeing new entertainment formats already been becoming a thing, right? So this kind of multimodal voice plus screen, gaming, education, reading experiences. Google has invested quite heavily into getting a number of mainstream publishers into adapting content, things like Harry Potter and and Sesame Street and things like that into interactive voice experiences that you can play on a Google Nest device. Alexa are doing very similar things with kind of voice gaming. Our colleagues and friends over at Vocala have adapted a number of platforms like Deal or No Deal and Jeopardy and these types of games, which now exist where there's no direct equivalent. You're playing it with your voice on a smart speaker. There's no direct iPad equivalent, or even it's not the same as the TV show. So I think we'll see some voice first, voice enabled formats develop. The other areas in things like news, that voice news is a slightly different format to any other. It's not quite live, it's not quite a podcast, it's somewhere in between. The voice assistant might be gathering different stories and replaying them to you. It doesn't have advertising, but it's not entirely non-commercial. And so we'll definitely see, I think, some other audio formats emerge from that. Podcasts obviously are having their heyday right now across the world. But podcasts can become more interactive. We can have question and answers. We can posit different storylines in kind of adaptive narrative lines and fiction. So I think there will be new formats that emerge. Exactly how they're going to play out, I think it's very early days to see that, and we're waiting for them to happen at a much bigger scale.
So, Laura has asked the question or has made a comment. Google recently added their look and functionality on its assistants, so you're able to call and interact with other Google devices. So clearly, we're talking networking, a certain type of networking, which is content distribution to a certain extent. Well, I want to ask you quickly, because you've mentioned a whole bunch of great uses, but you have done in Vixen specifically have done some pretty cool things. Without saying it, let you say it. Tell me a little bit about some of the cool things that you've done with voice, like what you did with Lysol, for example.
Well, yeah, we were very fortunate with our partners at Reckitt Benckiser, who make a number of different consumer goods across loads of categories that many of you will know. From Lysol, as you mentioned, kind of the global cleaning brands, through to Vanish for floor cleaning and others. We worked on an opportunity earlier in the year, and this was pre-COVID actually, so it's just fortuitous the way that, well, depending on how you look at it, the way it turned out. Was that we created an experience that allows you to get your local germcast in the US based upon your zip code. The data originally provided by WebMD, we've recently updated it to be provided by Kinsa, which gives you different levels of germs of cold and flu instances in your local area, and obviously now taking into account also COVID levels. So, that's an example again of providing utility, providing something that's easy to access via a voice device. So you would ask Lysol, hey, what's my germcast in my level? It would tell you how high or low it was, and you know how sensitive you might need to be around cleaning routines and be able to set those routines. So you'd be able to get reminders on when to clean your surfaces around your home and those types of examples. So we're seeing those types of use cases from consumer brands through to kind of much more entertainment examples in the work that we do with the likes of Sony Music. You mentioned new entertainment formats. We've launched a couple of different quiz formats this year We launched a hand washing aid and guide with original music tracks from different Sony artists called Hand Wash Tunes. And we've launched a #1 fan skill for trying to find the #1 fan of different artists by them answering daily quiz questions, which again is a new format from an artist that would never have gone to the effort of making a mobile app to facilitate that. But a voice experience is something light and easy for people to do daily, and you can kind of get involved with. So I think we're going to see more of those types of micro formats, tailoring for those little moments in the day where you're looking for something to kind of keep you entertained, but you don't want to be distracted while you're doing something else. I think that's a really interesting, kind of space to be in. So if anyone's got, kind of the 7 minutes of content that you should listen to in the shower, or the 3 minutes of content you should listen to while making your morning coffee, get in touch. We'd love to kind of find ways of putting that to work.
Well, that brings me to the one of my last questions, and that is, in this space, what is it that you're not doing that you think you should be doing or really want to do? What's sort of the dream of Vixen, you and Jen? What is the dream app, the dream thing that you'd like to see happen in this space?
Well, very simply, we're on a mission to make the most human-enabled technology possible through voice, and we believe that you can create voice commerce and entertainment that kind of makes the world better through doing voice technology. So we're looking for any use cases that help us do that. Think of all the things that you do in a day where you hate the fact you have to press a button. All of the things you do in a day where you hate the fact that you have to pull out your phone to be able to get it done, and you just wish you could ask that question or get that done. That's what we're looking for. There are myriad different examples and use cases, from being able to get my favorite bakery delivery to my house, through to choose the right wine pairing for dinner tonight. And I would love to do all of those things. So if anyone's got the contacts that would love to make either of those two things happen, let me know. But wherever it is, if you think about your own daily experience, if you're an entrepreneur watching this now or on the repeat, and you're thinking about, I just really hate the fact that I have to do this when I'm in my car or on my phone or on my headphones, and I can't do it right now. Those are examples where voice might be the answer. It might not be the only answer, but it could be a really compelling answer, and we would love to help people do that.
Hey Google, play Art Pepper.
Here's a Spotify station featuring Art Pepper.
I'd like to thank you, James Poulter, CEO of Vixen Labs, consultancy, education, thought leadership in the voice space. I'm really happy to have anything to do with you and your company as a consultant. That's just a terrific thing. If you want to get the Vixen Labs Voice Commerce Report, we'll make sure that URL is on the YouTube replay of this wonderful conversation. Brilliant, James. Thank you so much for your time. Thank the Global Entrepreneur Network and GEW UK 2020 for giving us this opportunity here with James Poulter. Thanks a lot, James.
Yeah, thanks so much, Frank. Appreciate the time.